Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Orbit Football Podcast. Once again, you're joining myself, Cade, my co-host Tyler. A little under the weather today, I will be, but good thing is Tyler and I are together today to wrap up a little bit of Week 11. We were together all weekend, watched the games all yesterday. We're recording this on Sunday. First things first, though, we got some news this morning. When we woke up, Jimbo Fisher has been fired from Texas A&M, a $76.8 million buyout for him. The Jimbo Fisher era at Texas A&M is done. Bit of an interesting breaking story today. I'll get your thoughts on this, Tyler.
Yeah, kind of weird because they kind of splattered Mississippi State last night. I believe they dropped over 50 points in that game. So kind of a weird timing, but I think this had to happen. I think a lot of people were expecting it to happen. It sounded like there were news reports, a few weeks ago saying that, maybe he was going to get another run. But I think this is the right decision regardless of how yesterday went. They still have a few games to play out. Should be able to make a bowl game. We'll see how they do in that. It's interesting. There's going to be a lot of people gunning for that job because, regardless of where the program is at now, one of the best jobs in the country, if not the best job, just based off resources that you're going to have. And A&M's going to have to hit on it because, the program, it feels like, is already set back right now. If you mess up on that hire, it could be pretty catastrophic.
Yeah, definitely. And the big thing that I get the takeaway from this, like you said, this might be the most sought-after job this offseason. Like, obviously, I know we've talked and tossed around a couple names here or there about a couple guys that we think could end up getting it. I know we've tossed around James Franklin's name a little bit. Another one's Dan Lanning that we've talked about. Depends on if they want to leave their programs, obviously. But speaking of James Franklin, let's get into the biggest game this weekend. Penn State takes on Michigan. Big news came out Friday that Jim Harbaugh was suspended 3 games. We had recorded in our preview, or actually a recap of Week 10 last week, that it was going to be that the situation was for Michigan that there was going to be a suspension for Jim Harbaugh. We thought it was going to be Wednesday. They waited all the way until Friday. 3-game suspension. He can coach throughout the week, cannot be in attendance for the games on Saturday. You and I really thought that this suspension kind of was appeasing everybody. Obviously, the Michigan faithful were very upset with their FCC fines that they ended up causing Fox this weekend with Charles Woodson, as well as Moore, who filled in at head coach. But interesting week, Jim Harbaugh. He is, he cannot coach the rest of the regular season, cannot be on the sidelines. But we talked about it's really the biggest thing that you see about this is that he doesn't really make any decisions when it comes to play calling. He's not he's not the play caller.
Just a vocal leader.
Exactly. It's not like he's Ryan Day at Ohio State where he's the play caller or he's calling the defense. Nothing like that. He's a leader for that team. He's a leader for that program. And without him, Michigan went into Penn State, went into Happy Valley, took care of business. Did not throw a single pass in the entire second half. Michigan did, and still beat Penn State pretty handily by 9 points. It was a close game. I think this game was a lot closer than the score might show. We had talked about the Ohio State Penn State game, and we thought that that game was a little wider than the score showed. This one felt like it was closer than the score showed, though.
Yeah, for sure. Just Michigan had the big plays. Big plays all day, especially on third down in the first half specifically. The touchdown to Donovan Edwards on 3rd and 11. They bring in 6, and Donovan Edwards just jumps right through gap and burst off Blake Corum at the end, put it up 24-9 to not end it, but basically ice it. Penn State did go down and score, but it just felt like Michigan. You could tell they were the better offensive team, and that's what mattered because both teams defensively, I think, played well. The rushing yards look big, but when we're talking about rushing, both of these teams want to run the ball primarily. Michigan, they've been passing the ball a lot this year, but I think that they've been passing the ball to try to get JJ comfortable to get in these big games and be able to throw the ball, but they didn't have to. In the second half, I think they were kind of just content with just keep stopping Penn State's offense because Penn State, when it comes down to it, I predicted them to kind of, to get their way in through the tiebreaker in the Big Ten Championship, but this team offensively, it's still not there. Defensively, I thought they played fantastic. I thought the pass rush was good, especially in the first half, and in the second half, Michigan only dropped back the pass twice, and one was on fourth and 5 or whatever, and just made a mistake there and let JJ get the first down and with his legs. So, I think Michigan, they looked beatable, but they also looked still very good in their own right, in my opinion. Just an interesting game. I think Michigan, it was good for them to finally be able to play some competition because we can kind of gauge them now, and I think they are beatable. But I still think we can both say that they're one of the best 5 teams in the country. And for Penn State, I don't know what you do. Mike Urich just once again, not a very good offensive game plan. Didn't get Drew Aller in some of the best situations, but also I just think Aller can be better. I think the offense can be better talented wise and just schematically. Just another year for Penn State where they're probably going to end up going 10-2, make a good New Year's Six bowl, and we'll see what we're talking about them next year.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Penn State has become nowadays in the modern sense of college football. I mean, excuse me, they had a chance to, really a couple years ago with Saquon Barkley, that really was probably the most talented Penn State team that they had. Couldn't pull that out. They're obviously their biggest roadblock in front of them has been Ohio State. Under James Franklin, they've only beat them one time, and it was the blocked kick game in Happy Valley that ended 24-21 in 2016, and that's Penn State's only Big Ten championship.
And arguably, they probably should have been in that year, but
correct,
we didn't get to see it.
Exactly,
they ended up dropping that Rose Bowl in a classic game that was. But yeah, it just seems like Penn State, man, they gotta make that leap, and I don't think it's a James Franklin thing. I think that that stigma's kind of been put on them, but they gotta figure something out soon.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, they can't win the big games, man. And they're like you said, they're a top 10 program year in, year out. Like, they're contending. Obviously, around the COVID era, they had a couple down years, but I mean, with McSorley, they were good. With Clifford, they were good. They were contenders every single year, and they can never get it done against Ohio State, against Michigan when Michigan's at the peak of their powers. Penn State can't do that, and that's a big issue. I mean, when you look at it overall, though, I mean, Michigan, what I take away from this game is that you're right. This team is beatable. This team, personally to me, I think it's really no different than the Michigan team from last year. I think it's a better team from 2 years ago. I think last year's team was a better team from 2 years ago. But I think this team is very comparable to what it was last year. And, I mean, that team lost to TCU in the playoff, and a lot of people said TCU didn't deserve to be in the playoff. So I don't know. We'll see what it is. But, you know, a big win for Michigan. They finally proved that, yeah, our schedule isn't cupcake. We're able to win these games. But interesting circumstances right now around that program. Obviously, they have the court. They're looking for the courts to file the temporary restraining order to allow Harbaugh. The ruling will be next Friday is when that will be. Obviously, right now, he cannot coach in the Maryland game, cannot coach in the Ohio State game, and now all eyes in the country are going to be on that game. That game is likely going to be a 2-3 matchup again this year. When you look at rankings, it's going to be a good game. I mean, that game in Ann Arbor is going to be probably the most hyped regular season game this year. Maybe even the most hyped game period this year. And
will definitely be the most watched regular season football game
correct.
in the country. And when we talk about it, you know, you're talking about 2-3. Well, obviously, we're recording this before Tuesday night. So, you know, we don't know exactly what's happening with the polls, but, you know, this is going to be, I mean, this is, once again, we're here sitting at the end of the year, both teams undefeated, both teams have taken care of business. I don't know, I'm really looking forward to that game because I think there's multiple ways that game could go. I know off air we've talked about it, how we think we can go, but we're going to save that for next week. Both teams still have to take care of business. Ohio State with Minnesota at home, 4 o'clock Big Ten, and obviously I'm pretty sure big noon next week against Maryland for Michigan. So both teams still got to take care of business. Let's not get ahead, but, you know, talking, you know, if you know both teams do end up pulling off, we should have you know, a classic in Ann Arbor.
I think we're going to have a classic in Ann Arbor. I think it's going to be a really close game. Little spoilers what we thought about this game, but moving on from that game, that was the biggest game of the weekend. Another big game of the weekend, College Game Day was at this game down at Sanford Stadium. Georgia takes on Ole Miss. I had it close. You really didn't have it close. You thought Georgia was going to roll. Georgia rolled a lot more than I think we both thought. And they also had Brock Bowers back in this game. And that was kept completely under the radar. There was really no talk about that. And we look up in the second quarter, and I'm like, holy crap. Brock Bowers is in the football game. He's playing. He's healthy. You could tell he wasn't 100%. They really used him kind of as a decoy and as a pass pro, more so for Brock Bowers. They kind of used Delp more often in the pass game at the tight end position. But he's back. Not 100%, but Georgia absolutely steamrolls Ole Miss this weekend, 52-17. Jackson Dart obviously got injured late in that ball game when it was kind of getting out of reach. So, I mean, I think we. This is the situation where Georgia, they're starting to separate themselves. They're hitting their peak. They're hitting their stride. They're hitting their stride at the right time. This team's good. This team is really good, and I think we might both have them, creeping up a little bit in our polls after this week.
Yeah, I was expecting Georgia to roll. This is kind of honestly what I expected. I just didn't think the score was going to kind of reflect it. But yeah, they looked fantastic. Another good game from Ladd McConkey. Once again, solidifying himself as one of the best college football receivers. Based off production out there. And yeah, getting him back has been a huge addition to healthy, I should say, for Georgia. But when it comes down to it, this is kind of the Ole Miss offense I expected. I wasn't expecting them to start out as well as they did. I believe it was 14-14 after the first, but just kind of hit a brick wall. That Georgia defense, based off just like the secondary, they were everywhere. They were fast. They were roaming. They ran with a lot of momentum, and it's another. Not to hit on Lane Kiffin, but what he has Ole Miss at is very good for what that program usually is. But, I mean, Lane Kiffin does have a ceiling at Ole Miss, that's kind of how it is, and it kind of showed last night. I think this is, we're getting a Georgia team that is looking really good, and they have an interesting test this week at Neyland. But Tennessee just did come off a loss, so what is that going to end up doing to them? Are they going to play up, or are they going to kind of slide a little bit? It's going to be interesting to watch because Neyland is one of the best college football atmospheres when it's when it's up and ready to go, and we've seen it last year time and time. Just an interesting game. Obviously, kind of disappointing for Ole Miss because even if they somehow did win this game, we're talking about college football playoff with them. One loss team sitting in the SEC, and it would have been weird because they had that loss to Alabama, so they would have need them to lose, but they could have snuck their way in and. There's a lot of playoff scenarios this year as we sit and heading into, I believe, week 12.
Yes.
So just an interesting game. I think this was Georgia's come out moment. I think I said it in the preview. I believe I was talking about how Georgia, this was going to be their game to put themselves kind of on the national radar. Like, yeah, we're still the national champions. Lost one game in 2 years, and they avenged that a few weeks later. So just an absolute fantastic game for Georgia. Something they needed, I think, to they needed that explosion against one of those good teams, and for Ole Miss. It's another year where Lane Kiffin has them running high. They shouldn't really be here, honestly, especially late in the season. We weren't expecting this. I think they've done better than everyone kind of thought this year. But once again, just a little bit of talent.
Yeah, and that's what you're going to get when you're facing Georgia and a team that's led by Kirby Smart. I mean, the job that he's done at Georgia has been fantastic. And there's nothing really else to say it. I think we both agree that he's currently the best coach in college football. Obviously not the greatest. That's the guy that he studied under, and that's Saban. And Saban's probably a close two right behind him. Those two are, I mean, there's not even words that I can describe to say that those two are one of the best, if not the best, coaches all time when you look at it. At least when it'll be said and done with Kirby. I'm sure that he's going to keep competing at a high level with Georgia the way that he's got that program ran. It's becoming... They're becoming the new Alabama. They're becoming that team that everybody wants to lose, that you got to beat. It's tough to play them. They're looking to get the first three-peat since Minnesota in the mid-1900s. I think it was the 1930s. It was the last time we had a three-peat in college football. It was like pre-World War II.
Which seems wild with the Alabama run, but yeah, it's so hard to three-peat just in any sport.
It is. I mean, not even the Tom Osborne-led Nebraska Cornhuskers in the 80s and 90s never got three-peated, which is absolutely wild, especially Georgia to do it nowadays with how competitive, especially this year, and even to an extent last year, how competitive the college football landscape has been. I mean, that's just hats off to that program and how they build that program. But a very good win for Georgia. And now we'll go out west. This game we kind of watched. We kept an eye on a little bit in the first half. We were switching between this and the UFC fights last night. But I know you watched the second half of this game. Oregon defeats USC a little closer than a lot of people, including ourselves, might have thought this game was going to be 36-27 final. USC just kind of, they hung around a little bit. They were a little painful on Oregon's side. Not what really, like I said, either me, you, or Blake thought about this game. We thought it was going to be Oregon rolling, but there definitely is a change on the defense with Alex Grinch gone for USC.
Yeah, I think the USC defense, although it still needs a little bit of help, need to shore up some tackling going into next year because at this point they're not going to be able to really be able to fix tackling at this point in the year. But I think they played aggressive and I think they played a little bit motivated. You could tell they were playing fast. They felt probably loose a little bit. Not gonna shade here, but maybe a little bit more happier with what they were doing on the field. But I do think they were playing well. But obviously, you're not going to fix an entire defense in 1 week under just one different guy. And they still looked a little bit soft. But Oregon, they kind of controlled the game. But USC, coming down late, they went for two. And didn't get it with a few minutes left. And if that would have happened, we would have put out a one-possession game. And with them not getting 2 points at the end of the game, they had to kick the onside late. They still did have 2 timeouts with, I believe it was around 3-4 minutes left. With the 2-point conversion not going down, they had to kick the onside and play the odds there, and they didn't get it. But I think it was it's a good game for both teams, honestly. I think Oregon, they take care of business. Once again, they move one step closer to Pac-12 championship game against what will probably end up being Washington with how that game went, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes. But I think Oregon, they take care of business. Bo Nix, once again, moves closer and closer to Heisman. I think it's going to be between him, Penix, if they get that rematch, that could be a huge game, and maybe Jalen Milroe. Those are probably going to be your top 3 guys, I would assume, as of right now. Maybe Marvin Harrison, but he's a receiver. It's kind of hard, so we'll see how that goes. But I think the 2 Pac-12 quarterbacks, as long as Oregon and Washington make it, that will probably be the duel for Heisman. But Bo Nix once again had a good game. Bucky Irving back, looked fantastic. Just a solid game from Oregon. They, we're not going to talk about USC's offense because, we know they can score points. So, I think Oregon probably wanted to score a little bit more, especially being at home, kind of a standout game for them. But, I think they took care of business. That's all they're really worried about. And for USC, I think they looked better than they have in the past few weeks. They looked up and ready to play, I would say, for going to, Autzen, which is not an easy place to play. For there, it would, 7:30 basically start time. So, I think it was a good game from both teams. I think both teams benefit from playing this game. I think USC obviously fallen again. But once again, I think it was a good performance for USC. They showed that defensively, I think they're going to be a little bit more improved.
Yeah, and obviously they only have one more regular season matchup, and then they got to go to bowl season. They only have the one game left. It's against UCLA next weekend. They're off rivalry week, so that'll be interesting to note. Interesting matchup. I believe that matchup is in the Coliseum. We aren't going to cover that, but it's an opportunity for USC to finish 8-4. Obviously, under expectations after being one game away from reaching the college football playoff last year, but that's how it is in the ever close Pac-12 this year. Very top heavy. You've got Oregon, you've got Washington, you've got Utah, you've got Oregon State, you've got Arizona, USC, UCLA was in there a bit. There's teams galore toward the top of that.
Yeah, and the thing is that USC, I don't think it's a lost season. I do think they are going to want to compete in bowl season, but I'm talking about going in the next year. I wonder what they're going to do defensively, where they're going to go. If they're going to hire within staff, keep the same guy they have in now, or maybe go out and get who they want to go get. But I think it's going to be an interesting offseason for them for sure, because I think we're going to see a lot of change. When we talk about being local to near Columbus, Ryan Day, even though they didn't fall multiple times like USC has, we've seen a clear difference between this year and the last 2 years with how many staff changes Ryan Day came in and made. And I think we could be seeing that at USC, because I think they know that under Lincoln Riley, they're going to have the assets and the recruiting. Right now, they're not recruiting well, but under a normal circumstance, Lincoln Riley has normally been one of the best recruiters in the game. So I think it's going to be. I think we're going to see a lot of change around that Trojan program.
Yeah, definitely, and we'll have to keep an eye on that. They could also hit the portal very well. It's another thing that Lincoln Riley has done very well is hit the portal to get certain players, especially at certain skill positions. But we'll have to see with USC moving forward. But we're gonna stick out west. Utah travel to Washington. Very very close ball game. Pretty wild ball game, I will say. We this was probably the game that we had most of our eyes on during the 3:30 window, specifically in that second half. But I mean, back and forth matchup. Penix, not the best game completion percentage wise, put up some pretty good numbers obviously through the air. But when you have guys like Polk and Odunze out wide, I mean, you're gonna have success, and that's basically Washington's entire attack is just toss it up to one of those two, and they're gonna come down with it. But they escape with a victory, 35-28. Very close game. Obviously, Utah's marching downfield late in the game, and then a very costly interception from Bryson Barnes. But he played a pretty darn good ball game, I will say. Did Barnes?
Yeah, when we talk about Utah, we're talking about this year they just have not been that well of an offensive team. But I believe in the last 4 of 6 or maybe 3 of 5, I'm not exactly for sure, they've scored 30 plus, and here they are with 28 points. The offense was not the problem, and I don't really think their defense was the problem either. It's just Washington. They're going to put up points regardless of who they play. They put up points on Oregon. They've now put up points on Utah. They're going to put up points if they get to the Pac-12 championship, which they should, as long they just have to win one game left in the regular season, and they have 2 shots to do it. So, this week they have a pretty tough battle, but which we will be covering, in our preview show later this week. But yeah, they just need to win one game, or they just need a few teams to lose. So they should be in, but they're going to score points in that game too. I can guarantee you that. They just offensively they are so talented. Kalen DeBoer, when we talk about him, he has been, once again, I said he was the best hire in the cycle when he got hired, and it's looking just like that still. He has been fantastic. He has completely turned that program back around. They were obviously good in the mid 2010s, that 2016, 2017 years, 2018, they were pretty good, but it kind of fell a little bit with Lake at head coach, and with his arrival, he has just brought them back immediately. Even last year, I believe they went 9-3 in the regular season, upset Oregon. They're a team that's so ready to compete. I think Kalen DeBoer, we're not gonna talk about head coaching hires right now, but if he gets that A&M job, I would not be shocked, because I think he is just one of the best coaches in the entire country. So. With this game though, Utah did not play bad at all. They played a really good game. They was in Seattle, tough place to play in. A really underrated place to play in. I think honestly, Bryson Barnes did his job. Made some big plays when he needed to. Sione Vake, once again, one of the best players at this point, probably in the country, and dual threat. Honestly, just can do everything. Plays both sides of the ball. Just a fantastic player, and we'll be able to watch him next year again because he is only a sophomore. So, just this Washington team, they finally, the last few weeks they've kind of not struggled, but they've played in close games. But this week it was a close game, but they were kind of out in front a lot of it. I felt like, even if they were down, I feel like they played just a little bit better than Utah. Maybe a little bit more talented, but still, I think they finally. Not put themselves back on the map, but I think they finally reinforced the idea of what we were thinking, probably about a month and a half ago, where they're going to be a national title contender.
Yeah, I think that Washington, I don't know if anybody in the country besides maybe Oregon can match up with Washington offensively. I just think that they are one of the best, if not the best offense in the entire country. Obviously, we saw the game that they had against Oregon. One last-second field goal goes wide for Oregon. But, I mean, Washington, when I look at this team and I think about this team, I like you said, I think it was a very good win for them this weekend, because it kind of reinforces that they are a player this year. They're going to be a player this year, whether they end up beating Oregon or not. That comes to be seen. Obviously, the College Football Playoff Committee has ranked them behind Florida State, which we kind of have been back and forth on between those teams. But it was a very good weekend for Washington. It was a much-needed victory for them. Just get back right on the right pace. And, there's not much more that needs to be said about that. Like I said, one of the better offenses in the country, if not the best offense in the country. It's going to be hard to compete against that team offensively if they could score more than 35 points against you in a college football playoff game or a very important game. But still, Washington's a very, very good football team. But speaking of the other team that like we talked about that we've been teetering on this year, Florida State took on Miami, rivalry matchup. It was in Doak Campbell this weekend. And this one, we were going to cover this game in the preview. Didn't end up covering this in the preview because me, you, and Blake all had the same exact thing. We thought Florida State was going to win, but we thought it was going to be close. That's exactly what happened. Florida State won. Miami tried to, lead a game-winning drive. Emory Williams was the starting quarterback they rolled with. He got hurt on that last drive. Tyler Van Dyke comes in the game after sitting on the bench the entire game and throws an interception, and that seals up the game. Florida State wins 27-20. Very close game, but, anything different that we can take out of Florida State after this?
Yeah, I think this game, basically, it went how we had it. I had them by 10. I don't know how much you had them by, but I'm pretty sure Blake had them by 4. So we were expecting a close game here, and it's what we got. I will say I think Florida State was the better team. They were out in front for most of this ball game. So Miami ended up bringing it within one possession with around 6 to 8 minutes left, and and they made some key stops to get the ball back. Emory rolls out on 4th down, 4th and 5, stretches for the first down, gets hurt. For a freshman to come in and do that, put his body on the line to get, continue the game for his team, especially, as big as a game it was for Miami and Florida State, both of them. Just shows a lot about him. I think, say what you want about his playing ability on the field. I think he's been, okay. He's a freshman. It is what it is, but he wanted to win this game, and that was clear from that effort. But like we were talking about, TVD ends up getting benched and comes in, throws a unfortunate pick on the 4th down and long. Just kind of no one open. Had to make a play, and it didn't go their way. But when it seems like not going their way, it just kind of seems what it's been like for Miami in ACC play this year. Just has not gone their way. They have not played well at all under Mario Cristobal once again. I honestly like the Cristobal hire at Miami. I've been higher on Cristobal than I think a lot of the general consensus has been. But once again, another just horrible year in conference play, and it cannot continue forward. I think this team was a lot better than they were last year. I do, but this team still has some things to do to be able to get towards that mark that they need to be hitting. Recruiting well, which is a good sign. But once again, that talent's gonna have to come in. Very young team this year as well. But for Miami, just another year where it's kind of just like, man, this wasn't how it was supposed to go at all. So unfortunate Miami. Florida State once again, they get the win. Survive and advance at this point because see what you want about them. If you don't think they've been playing well or anything. They go undefeated, win the ACC championship game. They will be in the playoff regardless of what happens. So they're probably going to have to play Louisville. Louisville just has to win this week against Miami. If not, they'll be getting UNC maybe. They play Clemson. So we'll be covering both of those games on our preview this week. Some big goals in the ACC will be hit this week. We should probably have an idea of who will be in that game. Florida State's already locked, so it'll either be North Carolina or Louisville. We should have a good idea of who will be playing in that game, come conference championship week. But once again, Florida State, survive and advance.
That's all they need to do right now. Like you said, that's all they need to do right now because, like you said, if they go undefeated, they're in. Simple as that. They go undefeated, they're in the playoff. Obviously, the ACC probably the weakest Power 5 program this year. Has been the past couple years. It has been the weakest Power 5 program. But Florida State, obviously, what's going to help them out, that win over LSU to start off the season. They've done what they've needed to do. Obviously, like you said, a lot of people in the country outside of us actually have this team very highly ranked. They actually have them most of them have them as the 3rd best team in the country. We both disagree on that. We both kind of think Florida State is a little bit lower maybe, but this is still a talented football team. Yeah,
the talent's there, but I feel like I don't feel like I've been hearing this a lot, but a thing about me is I think they're kind of on that Washington path. I think they were very, very good in the regular season, to start. But, as we hit conference play, they they haven't gotten worse. I just don't think they've gotten better, and I think a lot of programs around them are starting to not figure things out, but they did figure things out, and they're kind of just rolling with what they have. And I think it's not good enough to beat Florida State, but it's good enough to put them in a position where if Florida State does play a bad game, they can lose games.
I mean, yeah, I would agree with you there. Obviously, I think they're wrapped up in conference play. Actually, I think they have an out-of-conference game this weekend, I think against either North Alabama.
Yeah, it's an FCS team.
Yeah. It is North Alabama, actually. So they have an out-of-conference game, and they wrap up their regular season in the Swamp at Florida. So, I mean, that'll be an interesting game. We're going to do a very in-depth discussion of Rivalry Week. Just a little highlight here. Going to be 3 episodes that week. We're going to go full in-depth. We're obviously going to recap the week before, but we're going to talk about the weekday games, the weekend games. I mean, that weekend's going to be huge overall for a lot of importance.
And we'll finally be showing some love to some Group of 5 teams as well.
Exactly.
We're really excited for Rivalry Week. We're going to take that extremely serious. Probably going to be our best shows of the year, I would say.
Yeah, we're full in-depth analysis for Rivalry Week. Obviously, that's the way it should be. One of the most important weeks in college football every single year. So, but obviously next week we kind of got a little bit of a dry week heading into Rivalry Week. But yeah, I mean, when you look at Florida State and you look at this team, like you said, just gotta win. That's it. Just gotta win. And I think that there's a couple games where they could match up pretty well with some certain teams that are above them. I think that when you look at it, maybe I think that they would play like a Michigan matchup would be pretty solid for them. Something like that. Maybe either of the Big Ten teams. Florida State would have a pretty decent matchup, but it's a big win for them. It's a rivalry matchup. It's going to be a close game this weekend against Miami, but I mean, just hats off to them for just keep doing what they're doing. Jordan Travis, he had a lot of Heisman hype around him. I think he was my Heisman pick heading into this year, but obviously he's not going to hit that. But still, a very fantastic year for him. And when you got weapons like Gene Bell and Keon Coleman around you, it's very similar with Penix at Washington. I think those two teams are just super comparable to each other when you look at what they've done this year, how they're built overall. It's just very similar teams, but good win for Florida State. Obviously, survive and advance is all you need to do. But that'll wrap up really the games that we're going to talk about this week. Very short episode that we're going to have today because, I mean, there were a lot of good games this weekend, but things didn't really go awry for what we thought it was going to be.
Just very straightforward week.
Exactly. The teams that we expected to won, besides really Missouri, absolutely routing Tennessee this weekend. That was the only one that kind of was off the radar, but there's not really much to talk about that game because it was the Cody Schrader legacy game. I mean, he had a fantastic game for Missouri in that one, but yeah, we're gonna get right into our top 25s. I'll let you start here with your 25 to 21.
So I have SMU at 25. I'm gonna stay put. Iowa State in my poll for the first time this year. Been playing some really good football. They did lose last week to Kansas, but really good football down the stretch. Clemson re-enters at 23. North Carolina at 22, and Notre Dame at 21.
Yeah, we have something pretty similar, I will say, with our 25 through 21. I had 4 teams drop out. UCLA at 19, they're out. Kansas 22, they're out. Oklahoma State 23, they're out. They got absolutely curb stomped this weekend by UCF. I think we all thought that was going to happen, but maybe not to the extent that it happened this week. And then West Virginia, unfortunately, loses. They're at 25 for me. But at 25 this week, I'm sticking with Iowa. But Iowa, I'm going to go with Iowa there. Not Iowa State. I'm going to go with Iowa. I mean, Iowa's Iowa, but that defense is just absolutely fantastic this year. So I'm going to go Iowa at 25, Louisville at 24, USC at 23, 22 North Carolina, and 21 I also have Notre Dame.
I have Kansas State at 20, Louisville at 19, Arizona at 18, USC rises to 17. Think they've just been playing, against Oregon. I liked what I've seen from the defense, just improvement stand, just based off improvement. And Tennessee falls to 16 for me.
At 20, I have Clemson. 19, surprisingly, even after the firing today, I got Texas A&M there. They're still a very good football team this year. They showed it last night. But at 18, I got Tennessee. 17, Utah falls, and 16, Kansas State.
At 15, I have Utah, 14, Oklahoma, 13, Oregon State, 12, Ole Miss, and 11, Penn State.
At 15, I have Ole Miss, 14, Oklahoma, 13, Arizona, 12, Oregon State, and 11, I also have Penn State.
At 10, I have the Tigers of LSU. At 9, I have the Tigers of Missouri. 8, I have Florida State. 7, I have Washington, which, you hit on. We think they're very comparable teams, only one spot apart there. And Texas is going to be at 6.
At 10, I have LSU. At 9, I have Florida State. 8, I have Missouri. 7, I have Washington. And 6, I have Texas there.
My top 5 is going to stay unchanged. Ohio State at 5, the Crimson Tide at 4, Ducks of Oregon at 3, Georgia 2, and Michigan Wolverines stay at my top spot.
I switched my top 5 a little bit this week. I'm going with Oregon at 5th. They're going to stay there at 5. Michigan at 4 after being at the number 1 spot. Ohio State 3. Alabama up to number 2. And Georgia is my new number 1 yet again. I've kept the Dogs up there a lot this year, and they're right back where they're going to need to be. But that'll be all for this episode of the Orbit Football Podcast. For Tyler, this is Cade signing off. Thank you for listening. Make sure to follow us on all of our social accounts. You can follow us on Instagram as well as our Twitter accounts. And you can watch this podcast on YouTube as well as Spotify. But that'll be all for this episode of the Orbit Football Podcast.